So these rods back here have to go back in the holes. And so when you're reassembling, you have to make sure that they're going back in position there. When it comes time to putting it back in place, that's sometimes a little trickier. Okay. So we're going to slide it back in here and fit it in, and just, you kind of have to sometimes wiggle it in place because it's a very precise fit. So as I'm pushing it back in, I'm looking to see, am I picking up those rods? So I want to make sure that they're going to go back in where they belong. Now you may have to get a little piece of wire or something. So I've got that one back in place. And here's the other one. The main part is that you're aware that they're there. They're not that hard to put back in position, but you have to be aware that they're there. Now that I've got back in, I can push those back in. You can see everything moves nicely. It went in. If you're trying to reassemble the slide valve, if you have to force it, it's out of position. Once you find its exact spot, it'll slide in quite easily. So a gentle hand again, not the big hammer. If you have to hammer it in position, like you may need some tapping again. And depending on how big your compressor is, you may need some help with that as well, because of course they get bigger and heavier. Everything gets heavier. Then we position this back in place. Now what else can happen, one of the checks we do when we take a compressor apart, we check to see the position of that slide valve, because it gets centered and we can feel it. I can tell it's not centered right now because I can feel a ridge inside. And when on a machine, we take a machine apart, we can see if that has moved. If the slide valve has moved and created a ridge inside, or possibly even touched the rotor, that's an indication again that the machine has been getting liquid refrigerant into the compressor. And people will say that, well, screw compressors can handle some liquid. No compressor can handle liquid without it affecting the compressor. Okay, yes, maybe it can handle it a little bit, but it does its damage over time. So now that we have that in position, we're going to put these bolts back in with new Nordlock washers, okay, and cleaned up. So we clean the oil off the ends, and we put our blue Loctite on there as per the drawing, just a little bit on the tip, not a lot, just a little bit. Then we stick this in here. Now, we may have, because we can slide this in and out, we have to find out, make sure that it's right in the right position. Now that I've got that in position there, that one's in there. So we're going to put those in. And I'm just going to snug them a little bit. I'm not going to tighten them down right now because I have to position that slide valve. I have to center it. So I'll just put those down in there like this till it just snugs a little bit. I usually just, the center one I snug it just a little bit more, because what I have to do is I have to be able to move it to center it, but I don't want it to go back into its position it just came from. So I have it snug so that when I tap it into position it stays there. Then I tighten it down. So that one there, center one here, I'm just going to let's do it the easy way. So I'll just snug that there like that. And I'm feeling inside here, and I feel where the valve, the slide, and the shelf, I feel a bit of a ridge there. So I want to center it so that it smoothens out. I'm going to take my hammer. I have a brass punch. So I feel a bit of a ridge, so I feel that the slide is low, right that point. So I have to bring it up. Now I have to be careful where I hammer this a little bit, because I don't want to hammer on a sliding surface. So I can just go in here like this and just tap this up a little bit. I'll just go like this. That just moves it a bit, a little bit more. There. So I can feel the ridge is now gone. So I've got this thing centered. Now I'll just snug up the center one. And it's not very much, and you get your torque wrench out, and this gets torqued. You need a good torque wrench that's calibrated. Why do we need to torque it? Well, that's the value of the fastener. The manufacturer has calculated that that's where it needs to be, and it'll keep the body from distorting. It'll keep you from over tightening bolts. There's a lot of reasons why we torque things. So that's the important thing to do. It's just not by feel. Your hands aren't torque wrenches. Now we check to make sure that the slide moves in and out properly. Everything is moving, it's not binding. The rotor turns nicely. I don't feel like it's scraping inside. So now it comes time to reassemble the rack, the bodies. Okay. Remember, they have to be synchronized. So what I do is I push them all in. So everything gets pushed in. So from that point, we know they're synchronized. So they will move out together now once we assemble it. We had our drives here. Now, one of the things you want to remember, and this is, if you make this mistake, you will only do it once. So, when I look at the end of this drive, one end has a slot. And remember, that slot is for the capacity or the volume actuator and command shaft. So, if I assemble this, if I put this in for the volume and I put it in backwards, you probably won't notice it until you put the discharge housing back on and you go to put the command shafts back in. And I want to put the volume command shaft back in, and I can't on this side because I have no slot. Because I put this shaft in backwards. So you got to remember, my capacity's up here, volume's down here. I want the slotted end where my command shaft goes in. So that's something to remember. So we're going to do the volume right now. These are all back in here. So I'll put this, I'll slide this shaft in here. Okay, and I'll get the gear on there. Okay, remember we had the spacer at the end where we took it off. There we go. Now we have to put the roll pin back in. Make sure I find them. Stick it back in here. Give it a tap. I can use my punch or so there, I've got the volume in. See how they're moving out together? Those are synchronized because I put it back together with them pushed in all the way. Remember, you have to do that. Now we can do our capacity. Put the racks facing the right direction. Shaft here. One of the things I neglected to tell you, but when I said the slide valves are replaced as a unit, that's the slides themselves. These racks and shafts can be replaced separately without replacing the whole slide assembly. So again, we need to remember which end has the slot for our command shaft. We're putting the capacity in right now. So we're going to go in from the bottom. Put our washer in. Line up the hole. Go. Get our roll pin. There, got that in there. Now on the end, On the end of the, we take that little set screw out, put a little bit of red Loctite on there, and put that set screw back in. Right in the end here. Put a little bit of Loctite on there and back into the end here. Tighten it down. It's not torqued, it's just snugged down. So, we've got our capacity done here. They're synchronized. We've got our volume done. They're synchronized. Put our blocks back on. They're all the same again. These are torqued as well. I'll just check my chart. So these bolts are put in with some blue Loctite and torqued to 10 pounds or 120 inch-pounds. But most of you, well, if some compressors you use an inch torque wrench, but most of the time we're just using the foot-pounds. One of the things that this compressor uses all standard fasteners. There's no metric on the compressor. It's all standard fasteners. It's made in the United States, so tighten those down. Once you tighten these all down and everything's torqued, you want to make sure that everything moves freely. Now, once these things, we have them in position, we're going to check. We're going to put a spacer, like a shim behind it, before we tighten them. What we're going to do, we're going to put a 5,000 shim behind here. I'll get one out. So we just stick it in here, behind here, tighten it down, torque it down. Just make sure that it's tight, but it's not jammed. So we remove that out, stick this one in here. Tighten it down. Get the shim out. Oh, just a little too tight. There we go. How does it move? We can check it here. All good. All good. That one's a little tight there. Let's check it out. That's why we do this. This might shim. There we go. Let's check it out here. There we go. All set. Now we have the slide valves back assembled. Once we have that done, we can put the gate rotor assemblies back in.